Okay, so we're going to move on to the next topic, a little bit about collective behavior. And even if you haven't learned about that yet, I'm sure you understand what it is just from the name. So norms, mores, and taboos. Norms, mores, taboo, and the other concepts we have previously discussed pertain to behavior of the individual, so conforming versus deviant behaviors. So distinct from group behavior, which is how humans regularly act in a group according to their societal norms, collective behavior is a phenomenon that occurs spontaneously and often violates social norms. So collective behavior is basically transient behavior. It's these sort of things that we see happen when groups of people collect together in the same proximity. It's not group behavior, which is basically just how we normally function in a society from day to day. The stuff that we've been talking about is more so group behavior. Collective behavior is it's transient, so it's meaning it comes and it goes. It's fleeting. It's basically what happens when a group of people get together. There are different things that can happen in different contexts. So that's what collective behavior is. It associates and then it disseminates. And it often does violate societal norms. Doesn't always. So mobs and riots are examples of collective behaviors which go against the societal norms. They're usually coming together for a specific purpose. Fads and trends in fashion are examples of collective behavior that are harmless. So they see a steep rise in popularity and then they fall off just as quickly. And I put a picture of scrunchies at the bottom because those were a huge fashion trend in the 90s. They fell off. I do see some revivals for the scrunchie in modern day. But yeah, those are fashion trends that are considered harmless. So classification of collective behavior. So although classification of collective behavior is debated, many people have different categories. Anytime we're talking about classification or categorization, it's a social construct. It doesn't exist in nature. So if you have 10 different people, they're all going to think that their classification system is the best. In terms of the MCAT, we will look at Herbert Blumer's because he divided collective behavior into 4 categories. So the first one is crowds. And those are groups that form to share a purpose. So crowds may result in a non-permanent loss of rational thinking known as herd behavior. So this is what I was talking about sometimes when people come together in groups, depending on what context they're in. Rational thinking can go out the door. Mobs, like we said, is one of the examples. Mob mentality, I'm sure you've heard of. Crowds may emerge for planned or spontaneous events, going to a concert or waiting in line, for example. If you're going to the store, especially during COVID, and you realize that there's a line outside, you weren't really expecting to wait on the line, but that's sort of a spontaneous group that has formed, and you're a part of that group now, so you are susceptible to collective behavior, any of these collective behaviors, depending on what's happening in that moment. So a mob is an example of an emotionally heightened crowd whose behavior is directed towards a specific and violent goal. Just something to keep in mind. So publics are groups of individuals not necessarily in close proximity that share views on single issues. Those who share the same political ideology, for example, can be considered a public. And these publics can be grouped together, especially in the age of social media. So publics are united on issues. It's more of the ideology. Masses are united. Masses are usually larger and they share similar interests. And they are definitely formed through the use of mass media or the use of social media. So, if you think about Facebook groups, people with common interests, you join a cooking page or something like that. Those are masses. You're sharing similar interests. And then we have social movements, the 4th type of collective behavior. And these have the goal of promoting change. So there are 2 types of social movements. Active movements seek to foster social change. A really quick, abrupt version of an active movement is a revolution. We're directly seeking to foster social change. Expressive movements foster individual change, like a support group, for example. We're working on the individual rather than overhauling society. But they are all examples of collective behavior because they involve a group of humans. Okay. A fad is an example of collective behavior in which something experiences a sudden rise in public interest, is maintained briefly, and then experiences a rapid decline in public interest. Like we talked about the scrunchies, trends are longer lived in contrast and usually lead to social change. Yeah, longer lived contrasts usually lead to social change. I'm trying to think of an example. I think the book that I was reading used hippies as a trend. There are certain aspects in their culture that made it into mainstream, and they continue to be in mainstream culture. So trends are a little bit more permanent. Fads are super quick, really quick incline, really quick decline. One other important aspect of collective behavior is mass hysteria, or the collective delusion that spreads through emotions until it spirals out of control. In the age of mass media and social media, I think we are all ridiculously conscious of the effect that mass hysteria has on the population. It's very, very concerning, but it really is just part of human nature how, misinformation and heightened emotions and just complete lack of rational thinking can, spiral millions and millions and even billions of people into a panic.